Truth out. And I love, shout out to Big Bad Crab on this one. Texas boils prisoners. Holy shit. I read that. I literally did a spit take when I read that title, because I wasn't quite going there and thinking it that way, but that's certainly a way to describe it for sure. Prisons. That in the brutal summer heat. Now, last week or 2 weeks ago, we talked about Texas prisons, Texas heat.
Yeah, well, you talked about hospitals and schools having this problem now.
Well, that was in California, where they have to make like a heat plan. But
yeah, this reminds me of in Louisiana, in New Orleans, during a big storm. Everyone remembers that, Katrina.
Sure.
You know, that's where George Bush didn't care about black people. You know, Angola, which is, people around there definitely know Angola. It's the biggest state prison out there. It used to be a plantation, literally. They literally have them out there picking cotton. They left an entire wing of the prison there during Katrina while it flooded. They left people in there.
Yep.
Like, they just locked the door and ignored them. You know?
Yeah.
So
terrible. That might help you.
We have like an issue with feeling like certain people deserve, like beyond like just the punishment, like deserve to suffer, deserve to not get help. Because you know, when you say that, I also remember there was a whole wing of hospitals. There were several wings of certain types of like disabled people, obese people, people who had certain mental health issues were left, right? Also at that same time. And when you argue for things like prison rights, people argue back saying, well, they shouldn't have done this, they shouldn't have done that, because in their mind, being separated from the population, or, you know, having all of these other things that people are suffering from, that's not the only suffering. That's not the real suffering. The real suffering is that kind of torture that occurs while you're locked up. While you're locked up, you're scared you're going to get raped. While you're locked up, you're not getting the proper nutrition. While you're locked up, you're scared you're going to die from like dehydration or whatever. People have come to not only accept that, but expect it. So arguing against it is really an uphill battle, because people have really dehumanized certain populations, and the prison population is absolutely a main one.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. I mean, look at what they did during COVID too. But here, days of extreme heat. No, what we talked about was 2 weeks ago, the governor of Texas passed this law, this Death Star law that was passed by the Texas House and Legislature, all right, that eliminated water breaks that the municipalities were requiring for construction workers, like a 10-minute break every 2 hours or whatever, and they eliminated that. So this is kind of following up to that. Both Houston sued them, but on top of that, there was also this article by Victoria Law and Truth Out about how days of extreme heat without access to enough water and cooled air become deadlier for an aging prison population. And that's what one of those cells looks like. And it just literally becomes an oven. Similar to where a prisoner in Fort Bend County Jail in Richmond, Texas committed suicide. That's nice. Shortly after midnight this past Friday, guards found 37-year-old Elizabeth Haggerty dead in her unair-conditioned Texas prison cell. The day before, temperatures had reached nearly 100 degrees. She was scheduled for parole on August 2nd. She had been sentenced to 4 years in prison for not meeting the many requirements of her 10-year probation sentence for a fight with an ex-girlfriend. Her mother-in-law told Truth Out that she had diabetes, asthma, and high blood pressure, but was otherwise healthy. But in mid-June, she was transferred from an air-conditioned prison to the Dr. Lane Murray unit. 10 days later, she told Romero she was feeling sick, couldn't keep food down, had lost 12 pounds over the week, and 2 days later, she was dead. This past June, 32 people died in Texas state prisons. I'm going to repeat that. This past June, in 30 days, 32 people died in Texas state prisons.
Someone will remind me of the guy they literally just locked in a cell that like the conditions in it were literally like inhumane.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I forget that one. The pictures from just the cell were like,
oh,
what
that
the
was the
fuck?
one in Georgia. Oh, I remember seeing the pictures from that too.
Yeah.
They ignored all the cries. Okay, so during this last week of June, 3 people, including her, died in Texas prisons that lacked air conditioning. All were in their 30s. 35-year-old Tommy McCullough died while mowing the grass at Thomas Gorey Unit in Huntsville. His family told him that he'd been complaining about excessive heat and insufficient access to water all week. That, like, murdering the poor people is literally what they're getting down to at this point. Romero called the prison, but the family has no answers. We won't find out till the autopsy, and even then, they're not going to say it was so hot that her heart was working hard and her blood pressure went up. They'll never use heat as a cause. So, while the Texas Department of Criminal Justice has not reported a heat-related death since 2012, how about that? A study found that extreme heat was likely behind 271 summer deaths between 2001 and 2019. You know that's grossly underreported also.
Yep.
As climate change increases temperatures, jails and prisons become summer hotboxes. New York Times predicted that at least the next 5 years will exceed 2016 temperatures. Actually, probably each of the next 5 years will exceed 2016, which was the planet's hottest year. Even if it doesn't top it, this summer is expected to be hotter than average across the United States, and that means more heat-related illnesses and more heat-related deaths. So that was...
Yay, the planet is dying.
That was Liz Haggerty before she... Yeah, just gross. All right. I've become one with my sweat. Gross. All right, this was...
Like, imagine if a Russian prison had this many deaths. It would get like 8 A&E documentaries, you know?
All day
Or
long.
even if they were just describing it the same way, if they were just describing it as like the blanket of like heat, of, you know, all of these conditions, they sound so vile, they sound so inhumane. And these people have done such basic stuff. I mean, the first lady, the 37-year-old, got into a fight with a girlfriend like over a decade prior, and was back in because of some kind of, you know, parole violation years prior. So this one event over a decade ago was leading to this. And, you know, if we said that about like Russia, that would be just shocking, right? People would be outraged. They'd be like, look, this is why, this is what we fight against. But yet and still, it's exactly what's happening here. And it's so normalized. Like, I just saw a comment by, I want to say it was Bad Cookies. They were saying about how like they aren't scared about getting raped in prison. They're scared about getting shanked by a random prisoner on a bad day. But it's like, you're not just scared of the situation there.
Yeah,
you're also scared of what the situation causes everybody around you to act like and behave like. And that also impacts how you're going to survive in prison, how you're going to be able to survive, not just physically, mentally, emotionally, financially. It costs so much. The cost is just out of control, especially for such a crime as getting into a fight with your girlfriend that ended up with the police involved so long ago, somebody who you probably don't even talk to anymore. That still impacts your life to the point that literally killed you all those years later. It's just, you know, it just speaks so much to it. And I totally agree that if somebody described the same situation, but for Russia, people would have a lot more shit to talk about.
Yeah.
Well, and like, you can name any of these. We've known how to fix this for decades. Like, we've known how to fix this. The wardens know how to fix this because they've gotten free trips to Scandinavia where, you know, prisoners get a full house to live in, and, you know, where they can take care of their children, like, and get educated and fixed and, you know, brought back into society. Like, they have a system for bringing people back into society.
Gregory
Not
Walker,
just like throw them back in and go good luck. when the system outside is almost more fucked than inside in some cases. So,
well, and it is.
you know,
people get mad when they think about that. When they like,
Yeah.
I forget which country it is where the prisoners actually have clean cells and beds to sleep in and like toilets, like basic necessities. But when those articles of like, I don't know, Sweden or somewhere goes around, people get
Mhm.
so angry. Like you never see people get so angry, even if you bring up the fact that the vast majority of people in those jail cells aren't there for violent crimes. They haven't really hurt anybody. They've often, it's like crimes of just trying to survive, like crimes, financial crimes, that type of thing. And so it's fascinating because there's like a knee-jerk reaction to that reform, to just even the most basic humane, okay, but as humans, perhaps we should not have people living in those conditions. Like that alone gets people riled up.
Gregory Walker.
So you're telling me private prisons and the crime bill did perfect, did great.
Well, that was just it. I was going to mention private prisons and the motivation, the profit motive to keep these people in a system that keeps them coming back, recidivism rate being so high, versus rehabilitation, actually preparing them for life after prison so they can, and then of course there's the stigmas of society against convicts and ex-convicts and felons is in getting higher.
What's that amendment? Slavery's illegal except.
Right.
You know, what's that one?
13, 14.
Yeah, except we just call them wardens and guards now instead of like sharecroppers, and you know, it's same.
Gregory Walker is asking, God damn, that sucks, so close to getting out, but also asking about the vaccine status. I'm not really sure, but we know that they were requiring prisoners to be vaccinated regardless of their health, which also I take issue with, but everybody was required, it was forced jab type of stuff where everyone had to take it.
We're so worried about the deaths of COVID in jail, but not deaths in jail.
Not the deaths in jail, right? Not deaths due to heat.
I mean, they're forcing people to do labor. Like they're forcing people to do labor. What's a vaccine after that? You know,
well, the medicine can kill them.
Hysterectomies.
The medicine can give them heart, myocarditis and heart inflammation in a certain percentage of people that are dropping dead from that. That's also part of it. That you're making them now take a medicine that's I don't even want to. It was safe and effective. It's safe and effective. My heart swells with pride whenever I think about the COVID jab. Yes, that's
we love it so much. I got
as our friend Jimmy Dore likes to say. Yeah,
I got the Infinity vaccines, baby.
But yeah, this 46-year-old is talking about the prison over on the Mississippi River. Okay, Roderick Zavala. All right, he's saying that opened in 1878, 2,200 men live there. All right, he's one of the many Illinois prisons that lack an effective cooling system. All right, no air gets in.
Worked with a few of them.
No air escapes. The windows only open 6 inches, but their screens are caked with years of debris, dirt, and sludge, forming another barrier to breeze that might blow it gross.
They have a work program that goes onto the towboat companies. Yeah, Menard Correctional Facility.
Oh wow,
so that's fun.
Okay, so he's literally been working with the convicts for years.
Or they used to, yeah.
Where are they going to go?
I think they stopped at some point.
But
after one of the boats had a meth lab on it.
The 15 fans appear to be broken, and they haven't been cleaned in years, the ones that do work, so they're creating cyclones of dirt and gross. God forbid anyone like any kind of breathing problems comes in there. But within COVID...
Yeah, dude, look at like New York schools that haven't gotten funding, and it's like they've completely only, it's undercutting to get profits. There's got to be the infrastructure of that, like, what was it classically? What's the San Francisco one?
Alcatraz?
The Rock? Yeah, Alcatraz. Like you could literally dig with the wall with a spoon. Like it was easy because the infrastructure was like decades old at that point.
Yep. So Again, with COVID came weeks and months of lockdowns, confined to their cells. Incarcerated people were unable to seek slightly cooler temperatures outside, even access even the 8-ounce cup of ice normally allocated to each person once a day. All right.
8 ounces of ice are allocated. Okay.
No, an 8-ounce cup of ice. It's not even 8 ounces of ice because half of that's air, right? In mid-June, he said he had only been outside twice in the past 2 months. He said 7 days a week, 24 hours a day, I'm in a place that feels as though I'm wearing a 15-pound blanket of musky, smoldering heat. Yeah, I could see why it might be difficult to breathe in that. He suffers from severe asthma, sinus issues, bouts of bronchitis, combination of summer heat. I mean, this guy, it could kill him.
That's like what they put. That's like what they tortured Burt Reynolds in The Longest Yard with, like, putting him in the hot box, like.
Right. Between 1995 and 2010,
that's just life.
Right. Older people, 55 and older, nearly quadrupled in prisons. By the end of 2020, more than 22% of U.S. prisons are 50 or older. So now you're talking about a real aging population dealing with this kind of heat.
What the fuck?
We're literally cooking these people to death. All right?
Yeah.
That's so fucked up.
A third of the nation's prisoners by 2030 will be over 50. That is... And a lot of them,
and the other part about that is
homeless.
What's so sad about that is a lot of the older population that is going to jail is for things like financial crimes, drugs.
Yep.
It's not things
mental health issues that can't go.
Mental health issues, lack of health care, a lack of support. They're homeless on the street. There's an increasing number of homeless elderly population going to prison. So what we're seeing here is not only are they being jailed for these basically non-crimes or survival crimes, but then they're being tortured in their final years. This is their retirement. This is where these people are going.
Like literally.
This is where increasingly, unless you have a really solidified plan, that often it's not savings, but like relies on things like being a landlord or something like that. It's like, unless you have something like that set up, your retirement plan is so more increasingly likely as the years go on to be prison, where you're basically being tortured, and it's like the worst nursing home you could fathom for
homelessness. Or homelessness, worse.
You know, that's
the other thing we talked about last week.
Really well with that. Sending your Social Security money.
They're arresting them.
Well, that's just it. That's what I was going to say. It's taking the elderly homeless often who are on the street and then arresting them and putting them into the prisons, which are ovens, and cooking them like. Wow.
Yeah.
Well, and that's just one way of the torture. It's like the water quality is going to suck, I'm sure. Like they're getting poisoned everywhere. Like. But
when you think about when people think about the prisoners, they don't have air conditioning. People are like, fuck those people. Why don't they can just have air conditioning? Who cares if they don't have air conditioning? But it's like, when you think about it being the elderly people overwhelmingly in there who would require air conditioning just because they are at a weaker point of life. I mean, it's just, there's such a disconnect between who people are advocating for in these prisons and what people imagine, which is basically a bunch of serial killers, when they imagine who's actually largely in the prison population.
Yeah. And then you've got the people that would say, well, when they were living on the outside, they didn't have air conditioning. So you're literally giving them better lives inside prison because they're getting air conditioning. Yeah, you should.
That sounds like humane. An argument we heard before.
It's literally like the right humane thing to do. And by the way, why don't those people have air conditioning where they live to begin with?
I've heard these arguments before. I don't know where, but there's something like that. We gave them quarters, We gave them the scraps. House. Right. Yeah. We give them a bath, and sometimes we let one work in the house,
Yeah, it's gross. It's gross. So again, our walls start to sweat. That's so gross. When the temperature gets in the 80s and up, our walls start to sweat. The CDC and other health experts advise staying hydrated to avoid heat illness, but Stateville is one of several Illinois prisons where Legionella, the bacteria that causes severe lung infection, Legionnaire's disease, found in the water.
Yeah,
just
malaria and like
Matlock
dysentery.
Buys bottled water from the commissary. Every 2 weeks you can buy up to 24 16-ounce
like
bottles, which is not enough to stay hydrated. Right during prison's first shift, staff distribute drinking water from bags. That's the only way that people without money can access clean drinking water.
But why?
Oh, they're probably.
Is it up to 24 16-ounce bottles? Like, there is no reason for such a limitation.
You're forgetting about water. Commissary needs a kickback.
Well,
they've got to make profit at commissary.
Remember what those?
Are you trying to prevent somebody from buying water for everybody? Are you trying to just make sure people are always a little bit too thirsty? How is that even conducive to a better?
It's terrible.
Why?
It's terrible. All right. So in the summers before COVID, they might escape their stultifying windowless cells, all right, by going into the yard. But like many other prisons, Stateville began experiencing staff shortages during the pandemic. And as of September, staffing levels were at 2/3. And because of that, they canceled programs, school, yard, and chow, and more time locked in a cell that feels 10 degrees hotter than outside. Ugh.
Now, keep in mind, we're bringing Assange over here to be in one of these. Essentially.
Senegal girl said it. Cruelty is the point.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Yes.
That is absolutely correct. Cruelty is the point.
So
that's
why
we want
punishment
over here, because cruelty. Because
people work real well with punishment.
Yeah, here's a woman,
always
Paula.
Helped.
Here's a prisoner, Paula, who understands the value and how important it is to stay cool and hydrated. She spends $25 every 2 years to buy a new fan at the commissary. Like,
Jesus Christ.
She spent 32 years in Illinois prisons every summer. She and other women showered several times a day. They waited in line to collect ice from the ice machines in the day room. They sat in front of their beds in wet bathrobes, and they slept in wet bed sheets.
Yes.
Gross.
Yeah.
But those few options were slowly taken from them. They shuttered that correctional center. Mm-hmm.
No, keep going.
All right.
I know it gets worse, I'm sure.
She was among those transferred 100 miles southwest to Logan Correctional, and during the move, they confiscated the prison-issued bathrobes, so now they couldn't sit in the robes. At Logan, the commissary sold terry cloth robes, but they were expensive and couldn't get wet enough to cool the wearer down. Water streaming from the shower heads was too hot for relief. Women filled empty soda bottles with cool water from the bathroom sink and ducked into the shower to douse themselves.
Jesus
What
Christ.
the hell are we doing here? And this is a really long article. I'm not going to read this whole thing.
But then they're fighting to make it worse. That's like the worst part of the point is that this is like, that's too much humanity. These desperate women.
We go back up
multiple times.
Yeah. Real quick.
With bathrobe.
Go back up one. We got where it's talking about this elderly thing again, right?
Yeah.
And like ages but menopause. Could you imagine 90-degree heat and menopause? Yep. You get a hot flash.
Oh my
Dude,
God.
you're killing somebody. Your murder is going to happen that day. Like that's going to be a real rough day for someone.
There you go. Many suffer hot flashes, asthma, and other health problems. There you go. She went in at 25. Now she's 55.
Yeah.
What the hell did she do? 30 years in a facility. Jeez. All right.
Hot flashes and asthma. Yeah, that sucks so much.
So, and their asthma is not being taken seriously because the 37-year-old also had asthma, right? Mm-hmm. With her diabetes too.
And you're definitely not allowed to have an inhaler.
Easily treatable.
And if they do let you have an inhaler, it's not immediately available like an inhaler should be. So
here you've got a Texas House bill that requires prisons to remain 65 to 85, which is a requirement for county jails. But now there's a bill that was backed by formerly incarcerated people, prison guards, but it didn't Not a single person signed up to oppose the bill, but it died in the state Senate Finance Committee. That was in for a while. The other bills, which would have regulated prison temperatures and installed air conditioning in all housing areas, also died in committee before being voted on. So that's nice.
Of course.
It's a form of punishment here in Texas. They spent $7 million fighting a lawsuit to install air conditioning, which ultimately cost less than $4 million. They have the money. They just refuse to let us win. There is no political will not to cook people living and working in prisons. Working in prisons. Like, what about the guards and, like, the people who aren't prisoners that choose to work there? And ACAB, sure, but, like, the teachers and the priests and it's
people like Chris Hedges.
Right. All right.
And whatever the laborers are doing, whatever the actual prison laborers are doing, there should be basic, workers' rights for that.
Labor law for that. Yeah.
Right.
Absolutely.
Yes.
The implication
you're working the laundry, you're working the, literally any work program should be considered.
And they're working for peanuts. It's practically slave wages.
I have seen, I think it was in Chicago, where a group of family and friends of the prisoners formed their own union to help combat the conditions in those prisons, which is that's a fucking move. Like, y'all mamas and aunties and cousins and, can be out there. Like, and like, that's a lot of people to deal with, so like, they're going to have to do something. So like, especially if y'all show up for visitation at once,
right?
Like, that's going to be rough for them. So like,
there we go. Now we get you single. I don't know what happened, but I'm trying to do some engineering while you're talking. All right. So
like, what do they got to do? They got to do we have to literally hunger strike? Is that what we're going to have to do?
Well, they've already been doing that in a lot of cases.
Which is,
Well, but it does take that advocacy from family a lot of the time, from people who just, somebody, I don't know who said it in the comments, but they were talking about how, like, the drug crimes are a victimless crime. And, but sadly, when people hear from the addict or see the addict, they get very angry at them. They feel like it's justified, the torture they're being put through for their mental condition. But it takes sometimes the family to humanize this person, to humanize the fact that they were very young, or they were very desperate, or they were, under the throes of certain addictions. It takes that kind of advocacy really to create the reform that we're even seeking in the prison arena, just because so many people are just trained from an early age. If the police are after you, it's because you deserve it. If you're in jail, it's because you deserve it. If you didn't want to be treated like this, well, then you wouldn't have ever made a mistake, right? And so it's just, it really does take this.
Which for their own children, they wouldn't listen to that. They'd be like, no, my baby gets another couple tries, Well,
that's the thing is, certain communities get a lot of tries. For a lot of us, I've noticed, like, there's certain communities that, they get that one try. You had a child very young. How dare you? You didn't go to school at this point. How dare you? But then there's other communities that you see all through their 20s. They drop out of school multiple times. They have so much privilege to have multiple kids, multiple marriages, multiple opportunities. And it's not blinked at twice. It's seen as like overcoming. Wow, you've been through so much. You've done so much. And so that extending that grace to everybody else would be just a great first start, because for some people one of those mistakes is devastating, but for some other people they can make 4 or 5 of them in a row, and they'll still be able to come out on top without any stigma.
We also note the monetary gatekeeping of all that as well. If you can't afford proper lawyers, you're definitely going to get screwed over. If you can't afford $300 to pay for a marijuana card, you're going to get screwed over.
Yep.
you know, on something that your white neighbor has plenty to share. So, you know, like it's a shit show. Welcome to America.
So
You know,
they're talking about the elderly
like,
stuff here and how Illinois advocates are organizing to bring back parole because they want to get people who are older than 55 back out of the prisons. New York, there were 2 bills that failed in state legislature to try to get people out, the Fair and Timely Parole Act. Get these elderly prisoners out. The fact that they have to endure the oppressive heat is just another reminder of the urgency to support legislation like this and the back-end reforms that reduce the sentences of those who have languished in our country's prisons for years on end. It's simply inhumane. Yes, totally agree. This is a really long article, a good one from Truth Out, an important one that I think most people are not going to cover because the algorithm doesn't love it. It's not sexy. People boiling in Texas prisons is not exactly sexy, but it's not just about prisons because Houston and the city, you know, and this is about going back to the story we talked about 2 weeks ago, where Texas is passing this Death Star law, which is minimizing local government. So Houston sued the state of Texas over this, which we talked about because construction workers got their water breaks eliminated, even in extreme heat. So, so again, this was Chris Walker, again, over Truth Out. That's second one this week for him. Good week for him. All right, City of Houston.
also, could you have made a like less terrifying name for a law? Like that's literally what the evil villain of the biggest
Star
fantasy
Wars, yep.
bullshit in the world is. That's the literally ultimate weapon that the space fascists have.
It's literally
like,
based on
you know.
the Death Star. Okay, to explain the immensely negative impact that the state is having on local governments. That's exactly what they're talking about, right? So the law forbids cities and counties from regulating 8 arenas beyond what the state does without first getting approval from the state to do so, effective September 1st, including the lawsuit, which is filed in Travis County, says it violates a portion of the state constitution, which allows states and cities to self-govern, states and counties.
Yeah.
Right? What happened to states' rights? States' rights! You know, they want the right of the state, not the right of the municipality and the local government. They literally want it to be the power of the state over all else.
They want the right of their state, to be specific. You know?
It's crazy. So in discussing the suit, Houston City Attorney Arturo Michel condemned the law for denying localities the ability to manage their own municipal codes, including when it comes to emergencies. Right? It robs the city of Houston the ability to act quickly when it needs to, particularly in times of disasters or to prevent disasters. Certain things we could do, for example, in the areas of drainage for flood control may be preempted, and we may be challenged, and there may be people who suffer because we're not able to do what the Texas Constitution allows us to do, which is for local government to act quickly to address the needs of its residents. Yeah.
Well, secede then. Y'all been talking about it. Like, secede and fix that shit.
As a city? I mean, like, they're going to form their own state?
Yeah, for like a week and then rejoin. Right. You know? Like, whatever. They got the right to do that, don't they? They can like split into 7 different states. Isn't that the rule? It's like a dumb Texas law on the books.
Here's another one that will likely be challenged. There's another law, part on the books locally. Right? Harris County requires construction companies to keep records on safety, which allows the county to bar unsafe companies from engaging in certain projects and would likely be found in violation of the law if it's allowed to be implemented. So now they can't, they can't keep track of these because it's now discrimination against companies that may have gotten rid of those people and hired new people, but they're not, welcome to capitalism. Again, this is capitalism defending capitalism.
And fascism,
how,
to be specific.
Everybody gets punished. It's like, it's not just the prisoners. The prisoners are bad because they broke the law. They're bad people. They're also bad. But then it's like somehow the workers, the poor people, the construction
but they
workers,
also hurt the company. Right. Yes,
they're getting it too easy. It's like you get 1 cup of ice every couple hours. That's too much. But then you get to
do people know
the shade.
The definition of fascism?
Oh, they're riding in luxury cars.
The government working with corporations. Yeah.
Air-conditioned luxury cars that, yes, they go from shaded tree to shaded tree, and the sun never touches them. But here, an ordinance in Dallas that requires a 10-minute break in the shade every 4 hours for construction workers who are out in the sun all day would also likely face challenges due to the law. Removing that ordinance would be extremely dangerous, as it comes at a time when heat-related deaths at work are expected to increase due to the climate crisis. And I saw last week, somebody already did die, and they said that it was due to heat exposure in Texas.
Have you seen, dude, King of the Hill called this like long time ago. Bobby be stepping out the car being it's like 125 degrees. You know, like, damn it, Bobby.
Right. So other regulations that can be discounted due to law include rules for payday loan lenders that go beyond state standards, as well as workers' rights protections and paid family medical leave ordinances. Jesus Christ. The law could also affect the minimum wage. See, this is what they're going after. They're going after the cities that raised the minimum wage beyond $7.25 an hour, which was a state minimum wage. This right here is why they did all this, because they want the state to be able to not have cities override the state's minimums. This is a big bill intended to dismiss and remove protections from everyday working people. That's San Antonio councilwoman said that. Law's language is ambiguous, giving municipalities the added burden of not knowing when some of their ordinances might be in violation. Even better. So now they have to hire lawyers to even ask them if it's even possible for them to continue doing what they're doing. Who's going to get rich? The lawyers. Right? The uncertainty surrounding the validity of ordinances stifles the council's ability to meet their community's needs. Surprise, surprise. And support Truth Out. They're a good organization. Indie Media Award honoree. Chris Walker
they give us
one
too
of the
much
better
depressing
writers.
Stuff.
They
No. Don't give them any money to
They
call
also have
out,
TDS. They're
call
also a
out the
little shit
powerful.
libby, but we need organizations like that badly. Hey, how about that? We're all members of INN, folks. All three of us, Indie News Network, IndieNews.network, INN.network.